Hi, my name is Sheila Karuna. Welcome to Sassy Seer Sheila and New Light Streaming Love, as this will be seen on both channels. This is Reaction is the Loss of Authority by Jason Gray. And it looks like it was written January the 3rd, 2026. Most people believe they are responding to life. They are not. They are reacting. Reaction is not a small flaw. It is not a personality quirk. It is not, quote, just how I am. Reaction is the quiet mechanism by which a person's life is taken over one moment at a time without ever requiring obvious force. Reaction is what happens when the world touches you and you answer before you arrive. It feels like living. It feels like engagement. It feels like strength. Reaction is not strength. Reaction is speed without authorship. A reaction happens after something has already decided for you what matters. The message, the tone, the look, the comment, the headline, the memory, the imagined future, something hooks your attention and the nervous system lights up. The body tightens. The mind accelerates. Words assemble. Assumptions form. A verdict appears. It all happens fast enough to look like you. That is a lie. Most reactions are not you, they are conditioning. I could not agree more because I have caught myself reacting to things. Yes, absolutely. And most conditioning happens through trauma, in my view. And they are old reflexes, old fears, old rehearsed stories, old internal contracts you forgot you signed. Reaction is the autopilot that pretends to be the pilot. This is how authority is lost, not by catastrophe, but by 1,000 quick moments you never questioned. The fracture begins when reaction becomes normal. When a person is reactive, they live in a continuous state of partial possession. I really see what he means here, and that's true. It certainly was true for me. Their attention is always being pulled. Their emotional state is always being nudged. Their behavior is always being influenced by what touches them. They do not realize it because reaction feels justified. They believe they are, quote, standing up for themselves. They believe they are, quote, speaking truth. They believe they are, quote, protecting their peace. In reality, they are just being moved. Reaction makes everything feel personal and immediate, even when it is not. It collapses the world into a series of provocations. It trains the mind to interpret friction as threat and discomfort as danger. The body becomes a scanner. The mind becomes a courtroom. Life becomes a chain of triggers. This is the real cost. Reaction narrows a person's life. I feel this with all of me to be the truth. A reactive person rarely sees the full picture. They see the part that presses the most emotional buttons. They miss context. They miss nuance. They miss timing. They miss their own deeper intention. They start living in fragments. Fragments are easy to control. Reaction feeds on velocity. The faster the internal surge, the more convincing it feels. Intensity becomes the proof. The body reacts, so the mind declares, see, it is real. Intensity is not accuracy. A loud internal signal is not necessarily a true one. It may simply be a familiar one. Fear is familiar. Resentment is familiar. Defensiveness is familiar. Old shame is familiar. Reaction is often nothing more than the body replaying an old survival script in a new setting. This is why people can, quote, win an argument and feel emptier afterward. This is why they can speak and still feel unheard. This is why they can respond instantly and still feel powerless. Reaction does not restore authority, it spends it. Every time you react, you hand your state over to the trigger. You're saying, without words, you get to decide what I feel. You get to decide where my energy goes. You get to decide who I become in this moment. A person can have money, status, intelligence, and still have no authority if they are easily triggered, because authority is not what you control externally. Authority is what you can hold internally. Reaction is the quiet collapse of that hold. This is why the world rewards reaction. Reaction is predictable. A reactive person is easy to bait, easy to rush, easy to offend, easy to steer into a position they did not choose. They can be made to argue about distractions. They can be made to defend themselves endlessly. They can be made to they can be made to chase validation. They can be made to prove their worth to people who never deserved access to them. Reaction is leverage for anything that wants to move you without asking. Most people are being moved all day long by notifications, by comparison, by imagined conversations, by old wounds reopening on schedule, by 1,000 tiny inputs engineered to keep them unsettled. Not because the world is evil in some dramatic sense, but because an unsettled person is a compliant one. A person who cannot hold their center will outsource it. They will look for something outside themselves to stabilize them. This is how people become dependent on people, on conflict, on scrolling, on noise, on constant stimulation. Reaction creates a false sense of aliveness, a constant surge, a constant pressure, a constant need to answer. Real life does not require constant answering. The reorientation begins with a truth most people resist. You are allowed to pause. You know what? When I realized that was true, I used to say, well, if you need an immediate answer, it's going to be no. That's just, I got to take a minute. I got to take a beat. You are allowed to pause, not later, not after you calm down, not after you, quote, figure it out, right now. Pause is not weakness. Pause is not avoidance. Pause is authority returning to the body. There is a space, thin, quiet, and easily missed, between stimulus and response. That space is the only place you actually exist as an author. If that space collapses, you are not choosing. You are being chosen. Most people have never been trained to live in that space. They have been trained to fill it immediately, explain, defend, justify, answer, react. I I could not agree more. Think back to one's childhood. Boy, you better answer just as soon as you are spoken to, and don't take a moment to think about it. That, for me, is where it begins, or I should say, began. Yep. Silence feels dangerous. That's right. And again, I'll go back to the childhood. If I was silent, that might earn a slap. Delay feels like losing, not responding, feels like being wrong. This is how reaction becomes a lifestyle. Silence is not defeat. Silence is discernment. Delay is not indecision. Delay is precision. Not responding is not weakness. Not responding is refusal to be controlled. The pause gives you one priceless thing: time to arrive. In the pause, you can feel the body without obeying it. You can notice the thought without following it. You can let the emotion rise without letting it rule. This is where sovereignty is built, not in dramatic moments, but in these small internal refusals to be pushed. The real work is not, quote, controlling your emotions. That is the language of people who do not understand what power is. The real work is becoming someone who is not owned by their first impulse. Wow, that is so much different than controlling one's emotions. The first impulse is usually not wisdom. The first impulse is often a reflex, a defense, a conditioned move, a learned script. Most people are living in a loop where their first impulse decides and then their mind explains why it was correct. This is how self-deception becomes permanent. Reaction is not just external, it happens internally too. You react to your own thoughts. You react to your own memories. You react to your own fear. A thought appears, quote, I am behind, and the body reacts as if it is a fact. A memory appears, that was humiliating, and the body reacts as if it is happening again. An imagined future appears, this is going to go badly, and the body reacts as if it is already real. Wow, I think that's very true. And I was just flashed all of this with my health right now, right? This is how people live in stress without a threat. They are not stressed by life. They are stressed by internal reaction to imagined life. When you reclaim the pause, you begin to see this clearly. You begin to notice that you are not obligated to treat every thought as a command. You are not obligated to treat every emotion as an emergency. You are not obligated to act simply because you feel pressure. Pressure is not guidance. The pause is how you separate signal from noise. Once you can separate signal from noise, you begin to regain proportion. You stop making mountains out of impulses. You stop turning discomfort into crisis. You stop responding to everything as if it is an ultimatum. This is where adulthood returns. A person with authority does not need to prove it. They do not need to escalate. They do not need to, quote, win constantly. They move with restraint. Restraint is not suppression. It is the ability to carry intensity without letting it spill into behavior that creates regret. Restraint is the ability to feel anger without worshiping it, to feel fear without obeying it, to feel pressure without surrendering to it. Restraint is strength that does not need to announce itself. Over time, reaction loses its grip. Not because you become numb, not because you become passive, but because you become precise. Your words become fewer and sharper. Your decisions become cleaner. Your energy stops leaking into things that only exist to provoke you. You become harder to rush, harder to bait, harder to manipulate. The world changes around you, not because the world becomes gentler, but because you stop feeding what survives on your instability. Some conflicts dissolve when they are not reacted to. Some people lose interest when they cannot hook you. Some problems shrink when you stop exaggerating them with urgency. This is how authority returns. Not through dominance, not through control over others, but through control over your own state. The person who controls their own state controls their life. Reaction is the surrender of state. Pause is the reclamation of it. If you react immediately, you have already surrendered authority. Jason Gray. Wow, I gotta say, I absolutely know that he is smack on with this writing. Now, I got a lot being shown to me as I was reading it of my own reclaiming of my authority. Are you reclaiming yours? Until next time we meet, my friends, be well.